Hello, everybody. Welcome to Scenes, Subplots, and Side Quests. Well, I'm one of your humble hosts here, Joshua Awesome. You can call me Josh, here with my other host.
Chris CKJ. How's it going, everybody?
All right. Yeah, we got a fun-filled episode. Chris and I both saw the Fantastic Four over the last week, and that's the focus of today's episode. We're going to have a spoiler-free impression the first 10 minutes, and then after that, we are opening up to spoilers. We'll have another little spoiler alert where we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the opening sequence, the family dynamic, the drama within the movie, the villains and the stakes, and then what overall we think of the movie, our score, would we recommend it, and our thoughts of what this might mean for the MCU moving forward. So let's go ahead and jump into it with our spoiler-free impression of the movie. Chris, why don't we start with you? What did you think, without any spoilers, of the Fantastic Four?
Yeah, I thought it was a really good movie. I went in there having like a set expectation of it potentially being, a good Marvel movie, and I was hoping for something, to be just as good as that. Going into the movie after watching the entire thing, I was like, yeah, that met my expectations and a little bit more. So, that was my, expectation. As far as the rest of the film goes, I think everything kind of hit a lot of the points that we may have mentioned last podcast episode. And I thought it hit all the right marks from my impression of the Fantastic Four. The villains were definitely also within my expectations as well of how they should act and how they should be. And from there, I also just like the whole world as an entire Fantastic Four movie. The setting, the time, the characters, and the world building they do in there is actually really cool, really fascinating. I didn't really care so much about that when I first saw it in trailers. I was like, tell me the story. How does this build off into the next set of Marvel movies in the phase? But actually watching it, digesting it for about a week, I feel like, that has really stuck with me more than I thought. And I felt like it left a really good impression on me as far as the movie goes. I'm not sure if that impression is very similar to you, Josh, but how did your impression of the movie?
Yeah, I thought that they did a really good job setting a good stylistic theme in its aesthetic. If you've seen the trailers, you might know what I'm talking about. There's this like retro futuristic design that I really loved. I thought that they hit the mark on a lot of their personalities, which is ultimately what I wanted from the movie. And the overall plot of the movie was very reminiscent of the comics. So I love that. Was it a perfect movie? I wouldn't say it was perfect, but man, I'm not unhappy with the money I spent, if that makes any sense. Like, I felt like I got a good movie for the money that I spent. I went to see it with my dad. And he also liked it. He's a little older now, so if he can stay awake through the movie, that's how I know at least it was entertaining at the very least, right? But the villains were characterized properly. The stakes were definitely there. I felt like there was a different type of drama as compared to the last two superhero movies I've seen, which are the Thunderbolts and Superman. I think Superman was a little bit better of the film than this one. I think it was more fun. I think this one had a surprising amount of drama that I wasn't expecting, and we'll get into that when we talk about the spoilers of the movie. Because I think if you're looking for, I guess, traditional beat 'em up hero versus villain, you're not necessarily getting that in its entirety, right? There's a lot of in a lot of ways, the Fantastic Four is more about finding a way to fix something than they are finding a way to beat something. There's generally some sort of problem that needs to be solved with the Fantastic Four, and I think they did a good job in representing that. And leaving the heroic shenanigans for different types of teams. So I thought that was really, really cool. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good movie. I think it's something maybe more for the older superhero fan. I think Superman was definitely more for like, it could be for like any age, whereas I think for the Fantastic Four, a lot of the concepts might need to be a little bit older to understand and get. But for me, it hit the marks. You know, it was about family. They really hit the family dynamic. It was about making sure that each individual of the Fantastic Four was characterized properly, but also their family dynamic was also present, and you know, there was charisma and good rapport with all the characters and whatnot. And they did a really good job in setting up the world for the time in which they had. Because I do think that, you know, maybe there could have been a Fantastic Four trilogy that could have been leading up to like Galactus in general. I mean, no spoilers there because it's in the trailer. Anything that's in the trailer, I don't consider really a spoiler. We know certain villains are there. We talked about it last episode. I do feel like I nailed a lot of things in last episode's discussion as to what I think might happen and how they might be characterized, and certain fears I had with characters, certain wants I had with certain characters. So I love that. And yeah, I think overall it was a great film. I don't think it was, you know, pulling on the heartstrings as much as some other films. I don't think it had crazy action scenes as much as the other films that I've seen recently. But overall, it was an entertaining watch. I loved every second of it, and it makes me excited for future movies.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, I definitely agree with the whole like Superman definitely being a little bit more fun, because I do like watching superheroes punch each other or monsters or villains, but this one definitely did put a backpedal on that and just been like, hey, you know, we're telling a different type of story from what you normally expect from a superhero movie, and I'm glad with the little change up. You know, be like, hey, it's something different. It's something that, you know, if you understand the, you know, whole message they're trying to portray, I definitely think that you would enjoy it. But you know, I felt like very much similar to Josh, where I felt like they had all the characters, their impressions of them acting out very much like the comic book characters too, you know, pretty good degree. So, you know, I also thought that was pretty fun and pretty awesome, you know?
Yeah, overall, I think with the last several comic book movies that have come out, they've just done a really good job as to making them feel like it's a real life interpretation of the comic book.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
I feel it.
And this story had a lot of like a good mix of old school, new school. So it felt like Jack Kirby and had come to life, but using a lot of the themes of like Jonathan Hickman and the later runs of the comics.
Right. And
Perfect.
I do like the whole little. Oh yeah, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah. Well, let's just give our audience a little spoiler alert. We're 10 minutes in. Like we said, from here on out, we are going to be talking spoilers. We're going to be talking about the movie in a bit more detail. So if you haven't seen the movie, this is where we go into it. So go ahead and come back and join us when you have seen the movie.
Oh yeah.
And want to know, or if you're the type of person that's like, oh, I want to know what's going to happen because I enjoy seeing it live, I don't need to be surprised by it, then go ahead and stick around for the conversation. But from here on out, we're going to talk about the movie in its detail. Let's start off with the opening sequence. Chris, how do you feel about the retelling of the origin story? So instead of it being an origin movie, we get the origin of the team, a lot of their conquests and what they've done to save Earth, done in maybe a span of 10, 15 minutes, almost like a little trailer, just showing montages. How do you feel about that? And it also being set on a different Earth. I didn't jot down the number, but what do you think about the whole opening sequence?
Yeah, and then just to kind of heads up, it's Earth 828, just kind of remembrance of Jack Kirby. So just for any of you who kind of want to know what that means, that's what that is. But I kind of like the whole montage thing with superheroes. Like if you've known them and if the director in the movie does a really good job of explaining the characters, how they got their powers and how they've used them and changed the world or the city that they're in, I feel like that's, okay to do, especially with the Fantastic Four, with all of them getting their powers from a same type of origin. That they went to space, they got blasted by cosmic radiation, and they all got their powers when they came back to Earth. Now, I don't have too much of an issue with them showing the montages of like, hey, we fought this bad guy, we protected this city, this is how we helped the community, the Earth. I do kind of like that fast montage because to me, once I see, okay, they've established themselves as great heroes and helping the Earth and everything they've done so far, now we can focus on the story and how they develop from there when it comes to using their powers for this gigantic problem they have, quite literally. But being set on a separate Earth, alternate version of Earth, I'm also not too much of a problem because I mean it leaves up so many interpretations or different versions of the Fantastic Four. I just kind of like this one just because I like the retro setting of the entire movie, like being futuristic but also set in the '60s, kind of like the reminiscence of the Jetsons. I do like that whole type of aesthetic, but going back to that montage part, I really didn't have too much of a problem just because they had quick sequences of them fighting their different, super villains, if you want to call them that. There was, I can't remember other than the Mole Man, he was the commander of some super intelligent and super enhanced apes, if I remember correctly. I can't remember his name, but um, they just had a quick montage of all of that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure what your opinion is when it comes to the whole montage and skipping that whole entire, origin, Josh.
I'm a big avid reader of comics since I was a kid. I mean, one of my most prized possession is a comic I have that's been signed by Stan Lee. So it's like one of those things where I've been reading since I was a teenager, and I don't mind at all the skipping of the origin story. We've already had it. We've had the exact origin with previous Fantastic Four films. And while they are, a little far removed from today, we don't need to see them going up in the rocket again. We just need to feel that the characters have the history. So showing the montage, I felt like it was awesome because there were certain scenes within that were ripped right out of the comics, which I thought was really cool, right? It's like we were seeing comic book covers come to life, which I love. I love when, in previous iterations of films, it looks like, Frank Miller's Batman, or it looks like one of the covers, there's an homage to it. Like Deadpool did a really good job with that, right? So I don't think we necessarily needed big, crazy, long origins. We just needed to know that the relationships were there. I loved the fact that it's on an alternate Earth. I feel like that gives credence to also the other Fantastic Four movies, that they are, their own standalone entities, and hopefully might maybe set up a Council of Reeds in the future. Question mark, high pitch voice. So
Totally.
I like that. I love the retro futuristic design. I think when you said Jetsons, that it's like Jetsons meet the 1950s, 1940s type of aesthetic, right? I loved that. I loved, with that there was Herbie, which man, gave me big Johnny Five Short Circuit vibes. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that movie, but Johnny Five is alive. It was AI before AI was there, you know. It's about a robot coming to life. It's like the inspiration for Wall-E and stuff for people who have seen that, because this is like an old movie from like the 80s or 90s or whatever. And I just remember it as a kid, and it was one of my favorite movies kind of growing up. Made me love robots and stuff like that. And the retro futuristic design I thought was awesome. I'm glad that they didn't try and retcon them into the current MCU. But I think that's kind of what the ultimate end game for this Doomsday Saga, which, you know, we'll get into Doom at the end, I suppose. But it's gonna. I hope it's going to be like the comics, where it's going to re-establish the hierarchy of heroes within the MCU. It's frustrating with rights when you don't get to see your certain like characters that you're like, oh man, but you know, Wolverine and Captain America have history. You know, like we don't get to explore that in the cinema now because of stupid rights and it being sold off when these companies were on the verge of collapse and such. So I'm glad and hoping that once they're all under the same umbrella, we can see some of those stories brought to life. I don't think that the what do I want to say here? I feel like it was like decent pacing, but it did feel both rushed and slow at the same time, if that makes sense. I feel like it was rushed because they could have definitely set up the world more and longer and have more lasting impact with the conclusion of the film, because it's like, what changed? There's a baby now. You know what I mean? Like, there's in the comics, there's more cause and effect that's ever present and is constantly like the point of the series. You know what I mean? Whereas I don't necessarily think they nailed that aspect of the film. But the opening sequence, the skipping of the whole origin story and just showing it as a montage, I think was one of the best ways to do it with a property that you've already done before. You know what I mean? Kind of like in Batman films. Do we need to see young Bruce witnessing his parents' murder every Batman movie? No, that needs to be referenced in the characterization of Batman, right? So I think they did a really good job in that. I think some things that kind of dropped the ball were just, they created the Future Foundation, but they didn't really expand on it, because that's a big part of the Fantastic Four. But they nailed, I feel like the world that the Fantastic Four was in and them as heroes in it.
Totally. Yeah, I was going to say there was some weird pacing then here and there, but, we could probably talk about that a little bit later, but definitely needs to be mentioned up front.
Oh, yeah. Now, how did you feel about, this is Marvel's first family. We talked about it had to nail the family dynamic. How did you feel about the characterization of Reed, Sue, Ben, and Johnny individually? And then how did you feel they did as a family? Like, what did you enjoy? What do you think might have been improved?
Well, I will say Pedro Pascal did a very good job as Mr. Fantastic. I felt like they did a really good job saying, hey, he's super freaking intelligent, and everyone knows that. But he's also very awkward when it comes to like the emotional aspect of being a person, right? He's like, I don't really, I feels like he doesn't understand human emotions as well as somebody else in their family, like Sue, for example. But I think he did just a really good job just saying like, hey, I'm doing this really complicated problem, and I'm thinking of every good thing, but I'm also thinking of every bad thing that can happen. And I'm trying to think of ways to stop all the bad things from happening to protect everybody. And, that can lead to somebody going down a dark path of like no empathy, no anything like that. Um, so I think that's really good job with Pedro Pascal's Mr. Fantastic. And as far as Vanessa Kirby as Invisible Woman, I think she was amazing. She's probably one of my favorite characters in the entire movie. Now, I think she did a really good job saying like, "Hey, I'm a mother, and I'm also a mother of this family, not just my child." And she definitely put that energy out there as, "Don't mess with them, or else you'll have to mess with me, and I'm super damn powerful," which was definitely um, very cool to see. I really did love that with.
Now, just to give some context, the scene that Chris is referring to is so there are a couple of beats in the movie. One of them is Sue's pregnancy and giving birth, and then after they give birth, Galactus had given them an offer. They had gone up to visit Galactus. Galactus wants Franklin because he recognizes the potential within Franklin Richards. If you're a reader of the comic books, Franklin Richards is immensely powerful, a reality warper, a godlike type being. And when they come back, they mention that they had an opportunity to bargain with Galactus, but the price was too high. There's a lot of tensions in the world because the populace blames the Fantastic Four, and Sue goes out and is kind of shows you why she's the heart of the Fantastic Four, where she says, listen, the price was too high. Just know, like, how they want, like, I would never sacrifice Franklin for you. I would never sacrifice you for Franklin. Right. It's like we are family and we look out for our family. This world is my family. We want to save it, So that's kind of what Chris is referring to when he's talking about that particular scene and like the strength of Sue Richards.
Thank you for clarifying that up, Josh. I totally forgot to mention that as well. But as Joseph Quinn, who plays the Human Torch, he was really awesome. There's a plot in the movie where we hear the Silver Surfer talking and warning the Earth that Galactus is coming to consume it. And as Johnny is surfing or flying to go catch the Silver Surfer, he grabs the surfboard and tells her, like, trying to say, what's going on. She comes and looks and says something in her language and kicks him off.
Gave her the old Joey Tribbiani.
Dude, it was crazy. It was like, damn, she was vicious. But then the whole plot of him learning her language and then using that against her was one way to show that Johnny's just not a dumb kid. He's an intelligent kid, and he would, do whatever he can to protect his family, and, also trying to score an alien space woman who's technically naked. I don't know if that's what he said, but, very great scene. I loved it because, he gets her to come find him. She plays the sound of all her language, telling the people of our planet, like, hey, thank you for your sacrifice, because your sacrifice has saved us. But then he doubles down and says, here's the voices and the languages of all the people you've damned from all the different planets you've had Galactus consumed. And I was like, damn, that was savage, but that was a smart way of, getting the Silver Surfer off the planet.
That is kind of comic accurate.
Which, I was like, wow, I never expected Johnny to be that intelligent, because the other portrayals make him seem not that intelligent, right? Hot-headed still, but I love that intelligence part. Just so good, and I'm glad that that's comic accurate.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the comics, Johnny trained, like, they thought he was going to burn out because he's such a hothead and he's so aloof and, very lackadaisical, only cares about having fun type of deal. But when Ben Grimm put in the, like, okay for him to, like, hey, I believe in this kid, he stepped up. And that's the thing about Johnny, is no matter how carefree and fun he is, when the going gets tough, the tough gets to be Johnny. You know what I mean? Johnny steps up and shows, why he's there for the people he cares for. So I love that. I think they did a really good job in characterizing each individual. You saw Ben be street level, down to earth. He makes his rounds, interacts with the community. You get to see Johnny be hot-headed and, headstrong, but also show that he will do what's right for those around him. And you get to see Sue. I think that Vanessa Kirby probably did like one of the best jobs as to portraying their member of the Fantastic Four, right? Susan Storm is the powerhouse because she draws upon the strength of her family and being a mother. And they really nailed that in this. We'll get to some of the bigger, more climactic scenes and what we're talking about when we talk about how she's the powerhouse. She could be DPS in Marvel Rivals if you got a pissed off. Like, there could be two forms. There's like motherly Susan Storm that heals everybody, and then there's pissed off Susan Storm that just crushes people, right? And they did a really, not only did they do a good job of them individually, and I think of all the Fantastic Four, Reed was probably the weakest character because it's so hard to do the hyper intelligence. I think they did his awkwardness well. I think they did his like kind of logical thinking fairly well. I think they could have maybe leaned in a little bit more on it, or the struggles he has kind of overworking. I mean, they did it, but I think they could have. They wanted to make him likable, and that's the thing about Reed is I don't think he's that likable. You know what I mean? It's oh man. I mean, I hate The Big Bang Theory, but they try and make the hyper intelligent people still relatable, and that's what they did in the film with Reed. Is they didn't go too far into the intellectual sauce, if that comes across right. Right. I think they did a really good job though with their dynamic. I thought that there is tension between Reed and Sue when it comes to finding the solution and then enacting the solution, because sometimes the most logical choice isn't necessarily the best choice for your family. And we'll get into that a little later. But the dynamic between Johnny and Sue is very sisterly, brotherly. The dynamic between Ben and Johnny is very cousin, stepbrother, brother type. And there is kind of like a brotherly bond between Ben and Reed, right? Because Reed blames himself for the way Ben is, and Ben has to remind Reed, hey, this isn't your fault. This is just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Right. So I think they did a really good job in the family dynamic, and that's what makes this movie, that's what makes them different than other teams. Is when it comes to family, they're there for each other, and they each filled their role, I think, perfectly. There was even a point where Silver Surfer's coming after Sue, and let's go ahead and get into the drama of the movie, right? So there's two big climactic points. One is they get the message from Galactus through the means of his herald, the Silver Surfer. She comes down, lets them know the planet is marked for death. There's some foreshadowing because they've been getting signals from the cosmos, like radio signals getting pulled. They don't know the language. They can't analyze it. The Silver Surfer comes, analyzes it. Johnny chases her up into the upper atmosphere. She says something in her native tongue, and he comes crashing down to Earth. And she ends up going back to Galactus. The Fantastic Four then set out on an expedition to meet up with Galactus, try and negotiate something, or save the Earth. In that time, Sue is pregnant. They end up going up. Galactus does something to kind of almost like induce labor, and all of a sudden, one of the like what I didn't like think was going to happen in terms of drama, which is way different than Superman and Lex Luthor and the Thunderbolts and the Void. There's a woman who's about to have birth in space for the first space birth, right? So that's like a whole different type of drama, and that the Silver Surfer is coming after them and almost gets a hold of Sue, and he's like, Johnny blasts her out of the sky. It's like okay, and then he's like, you gotta kill her. It's like, kill her? It's like, she's coming after your nephew, Johnny. You gotta kill her. And you're like, see, that's family right there. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I can't come after my family like that. And Johnny, what the sci-fi elements is trying to blast lasers that are being curved through faster than light travel, and he's like, gotta calculate on the fly, try to shoot the Silver Surfer down as they're in like light speed warp drive or whatever. And man, that was the first like big climactic moment. And you got to see Johnny fly off the hand the moment he saw that there was no negotiation and that Galactus was after his nephew. Like before that, they're like, hey, you only have so much oxygen to go around, so you only have, when this is beeping at you, that means you're out of oxygen. And he pushes it to the limit, to the point where he can almost not breathe, because he's just like, I gotta blow everything up. And then it's like, get back to the spaceship. So oh man, what did you think about that climactic moment, that like moment of high stakes drama? Because there is global high stakes, which they get into later, but then there's that personal high stakes where it's like, oh, it's not just about the Earth. Like Galactus sees Franklin for what he is and is coming after her. What did you think of that moment, Chris? Because that up until that point, it was like a perfect movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was cool because like we get them, shown into the place where Galactus is staying. Galactus makes himself known, and when he first introduces himself, I was like, "Oh shit, this is a truly imposing force of nature that can walk and talk like the rest of us." He starts talking. He just like, "Hey, I have to feed this irreplaceable, irresistible hunger. Never, ever, ever goes away." And I see your son or your baby as a way out of that. And I don't want to do this anymore because it sucks. And he's just like, let me just take it, or I'll destroy the Earth and take your baby, right? And then Johnny just flies off the handle, like you were saying. Sue's just helping him, trying to, as much as she can, because she's in labor. Mr. Fantastic's trying to figure out how to get out of there alive. And then the thing is just picking him up. He's like, let's go, let's get the hell out of here. And the whole thing in the spaceship, I actually kind of like a lot. The lasers, Johnny had to figure out, okay, we're at the right curvature, it's got to hit her just like this. That was all cool. Although it was a little bit weird when she got so close to Sue and her hand phased through her stomach, just about to reach him, and then got shot out. And I was like, it's a little bit pushing it for me. But it was a cool sequence nonetheless, because she got trapped in a gravity well, which is a black hole, and they slingshot them out of the black hole. Again, you have to disbelieve a lot of your, knowledge base of, like how black holes work and how science works, and just have to take
well, they do that in most, in many a sci-fi, even in what Inception, or not Inception. What was the other one with Matthew McConaughey? Interstellar. They do slingshots around black holes. To get back home through that. So that's kind of like a little sci-fi trope, is you can use the well of the black hole to give you enough momentum to get out. It's got to be exactly precise, otherwise you'll get sucked into the black hole, right? But I love that, because that shows the mix. That to me was the mix of the superhero and sci-fi that I was kind of like hoping for.
Right. And they did a really good job, what's his name? Ben was like, hey, tell me, or Reed was telling, like, hey, when it hits this number on their, I forget what instrument they use to track the actual gravity or where the position needs to be. They're like, hey, when I hit this, you got to hit this lever and get a slingshot out of here. They did it. Very dramatic, very crazy. Although it was kind of a little bit weird for me just seeing a birth happen in the middle of a spaceship, also being chased by essentially a cosmic god and their herald. And I was like, it's okay. I just was not expecting a pregnancy to happen on a spaceship with no gravity, because they said like, hey, there's no gravity, so you're gonna have to be held down and push. And I'm like, is that the same as like giving birth in water? I don't know, but this definitely caught me off guard. And nothing wrong with that. I just was not expecting it on my bingo card.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I mean. That's what I loved about it, is that I wasn't expecting one of the high stakes drama to be the birth of Franklin Richards, right? Like when we saw it, we saw Franklin Richards in kind of kind of like the previews and trailers, right? So you assumed that like, oh, there's already the family there, but it was like, no, 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 this is like the start of the family. So I thought that was great. And this kind of ties into our next topic. We're going to kind of blend the topics because they all kind of portray into each other. The villains and the stakes, right? Like the first climactic act was the stakes of keeping Sue safe to have the baby and to get home, right? Otherwise, you kind of have a Lost in Space situation going down. And then we have the second, but before we get into the second, like climactic, the climax of the movie, what did you think of the portrayal of Galactus and the Silver Surfer and the stakes of the movie?
Let me start off with Galactus. I think the portrayal of Galactus is pretty close, but not 100%. Obviously, because it's a movie, they have to nerf him like way, way, way down to be conceivable threat that they can actually handle. Because if he was like comic book accurate, he would snap, take Franklin Richards, and there was nothing that any of them could have done, right? So I think they blended really advanced technology and high levels of cosmic, radiation or cosmic power that Galactus has. And I like that threat feeling you get when you first meet him, because he's all black, and then the next thing you know, he sees classic purple eyes that are pupils are squared purple. He just shows himself. He's just like, I'm large, I'm powerful, I'm intimidating, and there's nothing you can really do about it. And he's just a very dominating force. Now, when he gets to Earth, it is a little bit weirder for me, just because I'm just waiting for him to shoot like energy blast, telekinesis, these crazy amount of powers he has, but toned down. But it was mainly walking, breaking, smashing, kind of like a giant kaiju, which it was a little bit of a far portrayal for me personally, and I kind of get why they went that route. But I would have loved to see a little bit more of the portrayal of the energy attacks that he has and the other different special powers that the power of Cosmic grants him. But overall, not too bad. I would say it's pretty good, just not 100% for me personally. Now, I'm not sure if you have any different, opinion when it comes to portrayal of Galactus specifically, because, you're probably more familiar with the comics than I am from what I've got.
I think it's a pretty good portrayal. I mean, the big thing about Galactus is kind of like the Phoenix Force. He is more of a force of nature than a villain, right? He doesn't consume planets because he's evil. He consumes planets because he's hungry, and planets sustain him. And, we don't think about the wasp that died in a fig when we eat figs. We eat the figs because they taste delicious. Yeah. So oftentimes we're not thinking about that, and that's kind of like Galactus. He doesn't think of us when he consumes the planets, because to us we are like just bugs to him, which he makes that point at some point in the movie when he says clever bugs, when he recognizes there's a trap being set for him. Yeah. So I think the portrayal of Galactus was fairly accurate. Yeah, he's got a lot of powers. They didn't show a lot of his energy powers or his beam powers, but yeah, that would have made it almost too overwhelming. You kind of had the Silver Surfer be the muscle, which is kind of what the Herald of Galactus is supposed to be, right? And on that, I think they did such a good job with the Silver Surfer. I think, people, man, there's so many people that get upset with certain aspects of a character when they maybe get gender bent, or there's a different race portraying another race or something like that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to certain things, especially for things that deal in fantasy, it is mainly about making sure you're portraying the essence of the character. And that's what they did. There is, as we get into the second climax of the movie, this is where we get a good iteration of Reed Richards understanding that the solution to the problem might have to put his family in danger in order for that to happen. And that's where Reed and Susan butt heads, right? Because she's highly emotionally intelligent. She understands the importance of family and protecting the family. And when Reed comes up with the idea to so in the movie, Reed's working on teleportation. He cracks the code to teleportation. His solution to saving the Earth is to move it to a place where Galactus can't find it. And ultimately, Silver Surfer is destroying all the plot armor and basically stops that from happening, to the point where they're like, what is our solution now? Reed comes up with it. If we can't teleport the Earth away from Galactus, let's teleport Galactus away from the Earth. So they set up a trap for Franklin to be used to trap Galactus. And Susan's pissed off about it, but they talk, and this is how they talk. They did a good job in portraying Reed's intelligence. It's all about the levers, and if you can figure out the first lever, then you can figure out the second lever, the third lever, the fourth lever to fix the problem, right? So work on the little levers before you can work on the big levers, and that's what they portray Reed as. And the two stakes in the movie were saving the Earth, but saving Franklin. Franklin's always needing to be saved because he's a baby, and they don't know how powerful Franklin could become or could be. And they do a good job in the Silver Surfer, because Johnny puts together that the language that she said is also the same language as some of the beacons that are coming out, and essentially learns how to speak her language in like a month. There's a time dilation in her trying to get out the black hole, and it's about a month time in order for that to happen. So they buy themselves a month's time. It took them about a month to get back. So they're really living on borrowed time throughout the entire movie. And I feel like in the comics it would have been Susan, but in the movie, they need to spread the responsibility around, and they give that job to Johnny to break through to the Silver Surfer, which he does. He basically shows the message from her planet thanking her, but then shows a message from every other planet that was marked for destruction by her, right? Yep. So, and that is the whole characterization of the Silver Surfer that I wanted, is this person who, when faced with a godlike being, sacrificed themselves in order to save their planet and their family, right? It all comes down to family always with the Fantastic Four. And that's what I wanted. It didn't have to be Norrin Radd. It could have been his wife, and that's what it was in this one. It's about a parent's sacrifice for their child. And that's what it ultimately comes down to. And that's why it shouldn't really matter if the character is gender bent or not, or if it's, this has happened in the comics. There are plenty of what ifs where, it's another family member that's doing what needs to be done to save the planet. And it also shows the difference between Reed and somebody else that was in that position, is that Reed's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's not trying to sacrifice everything. If there's a solution where everybody wins, he will try and make that solution be the one that comes to fruition than one that might be bad, and that's what he says. He's like, I have to think of the worst possible outcome and what we can do to better that outcome, right? So what did you think about the portrayal of the Silver Surfer in this?
I thought it was really great. I did love her portrayal of coming down and selecting planets for Galactus to consume, and that whole plot line, like you just talked about, of Johnny learning her language by hearing all these beacons throughout, the cosmos, and showing her like, "Hey, I learned your language, and your people are saying thank you," and she's like immersed in like, "Wow, what I did actually did help my people." But then she just listened to all the doomed planets and the lives that she sacrificed for that, and then just that mental strain on her, just she couldn't contain and just ran away. I just thought it was really well done, because it's one of those things where, the Silver Surfer, from my understanding of just a quick look through of his history, is a very like emotionally, how would one say, really in-depth character in comics, just a lot of conflicting morals and ideas, like, you know sure, I'm saving my planet, but I'm dooming the rest of the universe, and it's not because I'm evil or he's evil, like you mentioned. He's just a force of nature that needs to eat, because he's, you know designed to be that way for, balance, right? So he just, having that mental conflict with Johnny, and just that whole betrayal, I thought it was really, really good and pretty darn accurate. Um, and then I just love how she's just always telling them, like, hey, just accept it, move on, or escape from the planet, because you have no way of winning this, right? You're doomed, you're going to be sacrificed, and that's going to be bad. And even when she got them to come to see Galactus, she's like, "You made a dumb choice. You should have just ran away. You should have left the planet." And I just thought that was really well done. And, you know, I just couldn't think of anything else that would have improved on. Like, I didn't really care that she was a woman. I thought that just made the connection between her and Johnny just a little bit more making sense, because if, it was a guy, it could have been a different dynamic.
Well,
But I feel like it
Johnny's
had
Johnny's like the Captain Kirk, so he's the ladies' man. So it kind of made sense in Johnny connecting in that way for sure. So you felt this, you felt the stakes of the movie.
Yes, I did feel the stakes. It was pretty good. And I felt like it just hit those right marks. Nothing crazy, but just enough to be like, hey, this is what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like the use of Franklin at the end, they had to try and get Galactus there. I felt like, I feel like the movie could have been two movies, and they could have stretched things out. Like the first climax of the first movie could have been them having fought the Silver Surfer, and could have left on a cliffhanger of them stuck in space and stuff like that. And then a second movie come in with their preparation of Galactus. Because I do feel like the pacing of the movie, some parts move way faster than others and stuff like that. But they had to cram a lot into one movie. They're basically setting up who the Fantastic Four are and Doom. Like there was a little bit of Latveria there and Doom not present. But yeah, and I think let's talk about our favorite scenes, and we'll talk about our overall review of the movie. My favorite scene was when Franklin, this is my interpretation of it. Franklin activated his powers to save his mom. Powerhouse Sue Storm essentially pushed off a Celestial, because Galactus in the comics is a survivor of like a Ragnarok situation where his original universe was doomed and essentially destroyed, and he is the lone survivor in the new universe that formed. He then takes on a role of a force of nature, of being the devourer of worlds, and basically is of a celestial in terms of power and whatnot. So Susan was able to just push him back nearly by herself. I mean, definitely it was a Fantastic Four team effort, but she was like, you know,
95% of that.
yeah, she was Shane Top in Smosh, you know, 99% power with her on the team.
Oh yeah.
uh,
Dude.
so that was I think my favorite part of the movie was when Franklin had activated his powers for a brief second to save his mom. What was your favorite scene in the movie?
I would say that, scene where Franklin brings back his mom Sue was definitely a close, first for me. But I think the first, my favorite scene is where they're escaping Galactus and they shoot in that wormhole type of deal, and they
Yeah.
feel like they're safe, they're good, and then next thing you know, Silver Surfer, boom, pops into that tube's like, nah, you ain't getting away from me that easy. And she's just going. She's like an unstoppable force, juggernaut type of thing. She's going, she's going. Everyone's freaking out. They're trying to figure out what's gonna do. The visuals of that were so amazing.
Yeah.
If you have the
Yeah, that was a
chance
good
to go
moment.
see it in theaters, please do. Just for that visual scene, in my opinion, and the black hole. That whole scene visually was good, amazing. Um, but I did like, Sue pushing Galactus into that, transporter, sending him away, and then Reed's like, you know what? I gotta step up. He stretches, grabs a giant pole, smacks into Galactus. But this is another one of my favorites. All right. Galactus grabs Reed. He's just like stretching him as far as
Oh,
he can, and he's like, I was like, oh my god, that looks godly painful. No. And then, I also love the scene where Johnny's just taking Ben. And the funny part about that is in the movie, Johnny makes a quick comment of like, hey, you look kind of good with a little bit of stub on your beard. So he has a full beard. Johnny's carrying him and flying into Galactus, and he's telling him to say it. And then as he throws him, he actually finally says the line, it's clobbering time, and whacks him right in the face.
I gotta
One of my
say,
favorites.
I gotta say, his delivery of its clobbering time could have been better.
I mean, you're not wrong.
It
It definitely
didn't
could have
have
been
the
better,
same
but
impact as, you know, like when you're in Marvel Rivals, it's like, the ult is here. Oh no, you know what I mean? It didn't feel like that, and
yeah.
that's what they needed to bring for its clobbering time. I think that was actually the misstep in that movie is his unwillingness to say it, because it's an essential part of him in the comics, and the fact that they kind of like push back on that, or the thing push back on that, that's one of the things I didn't like about the movie, is how he's like, don't make me say it, don't make me say it. I'm like, but it's your thing, this is the that's like if Hulk smash was like, don't Hulk not smash, Hulk angry but not smash. He's like, yo dude, no, Hulk smash, bro, that's what Hulk does, and you need to
Yeah.
say it, because that's the thing. It's like we took 15 movies for Captain America to freaking say Avengers Assemble, you know what I mean? And when he
Oh,
said
yeah,
it,
definitely.
you felt the weight of it. Yeah, you feel like you didn't feel the weight of the thing when he said that.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
they were trying to go for that, but it just didn't hit. I mean, a little louder, a little bit more energy, but
Yeah,
I
it
thought
needed
it
more
was
energy.
okay, but yeah.
What was your overall score, and what did you think of? Well, yeah, what was your overall score of the movie? You'd say?
I would rate this movie a solid 8 out of 10. There were a few things that I think it could have bumped it up to a 9, but I feel comfortable leaving it at a 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I gave Superman like an 8.8 or 8.9. I think I would give this one an 8.5. I think it was fun. I think it hit a lot of the marks that I wanted it to hit, but for some reason there was still a couple things that felt lacking, but not so much so that it's a bad movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
no.
it's more of, man, everything was so great, but in order for it to bump it up to a fantastic movie, they needed to hit a couple of other things out of the park, where they hit some fair balls and they got on base, but they didn't hit the grand slam, you know?
Right, right. Like, just a few things. Like, it could have been two things that would have made me go from an 8 to a 10. One, the movie be longer in itself and exploring a little bit more of those plot lines that felt like they were rushed or slowed down and better pace it.
Mm-hmm.
Or two, like you mentioned earlier, making it two movies. You know, focusing on Silver Surfer, then Galactus. If that was the case, I would have been like, yeah, that 9 out of 10. Amazing. But I feel comfortable leaving it there for those particular reasons.
Yeah, like so there could have been moments. What would have made it a higher rating for me is if they did kind of split it up into two movies, so that way there wasn't that stop and go pacing. But if they extended it out and they gave us more context for Johnny learning that Silver Surfer saved her planet, I think that revelation would have been a good one and would have given more credence to Johnny as like a scientist, because they did give everybody that role in their expertise and stuff like that. And Johnny was supposed to be like a linguist. I think they could have like save that for a second movie, like finding out the Silver Surfer's like origins and then using that to convert her to help save their planet, because that's what she did for her planet. And the end, I wish there was either more Doom or no Doom. I mean, there pretty much was no Doom, but I think canonically, what I would have liked to see, because here's the problem with the movie: nothing really changed and no characters really grew. Right. Yeah. So like normally there should be some sort of consequence for Reed's actions. It would have been nice if in him trying to do the teleportation, he might have ripped a hole into the multiverse. Right there. That could have been good. I really I feel like they're not giving Valeria Richards her due, and she's an important part of the Fantastic Four family. And there could have been a great scene of her, maybe as like almost like an adult, trying to fix the timeline where she's born. Right, something like that, where some Doom has done something to prevent her from being born, or something like that, where like they could have been fighting over Franklin at the end, in a way where like they do a name drop of Valeria Richards or something like that. Or she's working on a problem because her dad couldn't solve it. Doom couldn't solve it, stuff like that. I do think that in the time in which they sent Galactus and Silver Surfer off into another galaxy or universe, Doom has been studying Galactus's ship, and that's how Doom gets his big upgrades and technology. Maybe he was a sorcerer before, and now he's doing the tech bit from there, mastering both technology and magic. But that's what could have like brought it out from like an 8.5 to a 9.5 if there was just a little bit more forethought or explanation in some of the like big jumps.
Yeah, I was going to say, I kind of agree with the Doom. Either show a lot of Doom or no Doom at all. Because it was cool seeing Latveria at the, United Nations. And it makes sense, Doom doesn't want to help Reed for any kind of reason, right? So that made sense. And then a few Easter eggs just letting us know, like, hey, Doom's here, but he's just not here, right?
Yeah.
And then just him at the, end credits where Sue's trying to find Franklin's favorite book. And you just see Doom holding his mask and Franklin touching it, which to me it either means he's impressed by his face or healing his face, which I don't know. But I feel like, sure, that's a way to show, like, hey, Fantastic Four is going to be in the next Avengers movie, Doomsday. But it just didn't hit. It was cool, right? Don't get me wrong. It was cool. But I feel like it could have been better if they would have either left him out and, like, Franklin disappeared and, like, hey, no one's here but a calling card of Doom of some sort, right?
Gone babysitting, Doom.
Exactly, right? So you just took the baby and will bring it back. But, that's kind of what I think. Just either show a lot of Doom or show no Doom, because people want them and you just got to do them justice by having none or all, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I think of Valeria Richards like setup would have been really good at that moment, being like, Dad or Mom, I know you don't know me, but I am your daughter. It's happening in a weird way. There's a problem with the multiverse and we need your help,
Totally.
Cool. Well, thank you all for watching. This has been our impressions and review of the Fantastic Four. Next week, we are going to be coming off of our last reaction to the last episode of Ironheart, and we're going to be talking about our top 3 comics and manga from Marvel Comics, DC Comics, independent comics, and mangas. So it's going to be an Ironheart, and we're going to we're working on reining it in and not being as loosey-goosey with our topics, where we're only spending like 30 seconds on certain things and then 5 minutes on certain things. So we're just adding a little structure. We're trying to grow as a podcast and maybe actually be like a real podcast. So tune in next week for our thoughts on Ironheart, how it fits into the greater MCU, and our book club. We'll probably do something. We have a Discord we haven't launched yet, but we'll probably have some sort of maybe book club that we're going to do, and we're going to try and hit up comics and manga on the first Wednesday of every month, so that way we can read everything for that month and then share our thoughts at the beginning of the next month.
Heck yeah.
Awesome. Well, like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Bye.
Peace.